today, I'm going to try and teach you all guitar. Now, I'm not talking about actually playing guitar, I'm talking about the energy of the guitar itself. The guitar has been a huge part of the evolution of music, and a big reason is how the energy of a guitar's strings has been transformed over the years into a huge range of sound. We're going to travel through the history of that journey all the way up to today's technology. But first, we're going to do a little refresher on the physics of sound. Now, sound is a special kind of energy where air particles are moved. When moving air particles hit our eardrums, it generates an electrical impulse, travels up to our brain, and we hear a sound. Of course, sound is invisible, so to help us visualize it, I found an animation clip that's actually over 60 years old, but does a pretty good job of showing us what sound might look like if we could see it. Now, when a tuning fork is hit, the air molecules around it are moved in tandem with the physical vibration of the tines, and this creates sound waves, which is a repeating pattern of air movement that we hear as a steady tone. Now, a great way to visualize sound is imagine graphing over time the amount of air movement that the sound wave is causing. It's pretty simple. This type of representation of a sound is really helpful in being able to describe elements of sound. Now, for a musician, they really only have three variables to work with sound, three very basic elements. One is loudness, basically how much air we're moving, the volume. The more air we move, the larger the waveform, and the louder the sound. Next up is frequency, or pitch. This is determined by how quickly we're moving the air. Obviously, higher pitches, we're moving the air faster. And last up is timbre or tone. This is the actual shape of the waveform and determines whether we're going to be hearing something that might sound like a pure tone or something more complex. The shape of a waveform is a really big part of what something sounds like, and it's why when we hear a trumpet play the same note as a flute, we can still tell that it's a trumpet. But I said I was going to talk about guitar. So, how a guitar works is fairly obvious to most people, I believe. We strum the strings, it moves the air, we hear the sound. Right? We can control how loud it is by how hard we strum. We can control pitch by the length of the string or the tension of the string, like so. Now, since we're here to talk about energy, let's take a look at the actual energy going on with a guitar string in slow motion. When we exert force down on a string, we're actually transferring potential energy onto that string. And when we release it, that gets converted into kinetic energy. And like a pendulum, it swings past its resting point, converting back into potential energy. And the rate of this back and forth movement is what determines the pitch that we hear. Of course, the string's bouncing back and forth, it's bumping into air particles, it's bouncing around the body of the guitar, travels up to our ears, and that's how we get to hear it. So that's the basic physics of a guitar. And it happily existed for many hundreds of years. Everything seemed to be going fine until someone had the bright idea of putting a guitar in a band. Now, in the 20s and 30s, big bands were the thing of the era, along with horn sections and drums, and our poor guitar started to sound just a bit tiny. It was a lot to compete with. And playing in auditoriums like this really made it obvious, as I'm sure you all just heard, that hearing a guitar in a big space is a bit of a problem. So the first challenge now came up, which is how can we take this acoustic energy and figure out a way to make it louder? Now, the first step for that was fairly obvious. Let's use a microphone. We can take the sound waves. What a microphone will do is convert the acoustic energy into a voltage. When the air waves go in and out, the voltage will go up and down. And now that can be connected through a wire to an amplifier, whose job is just to make a voltage larger. And that can be connected to a speaker, where the electrical energy is now converted back into acoustic energy by moving a speaker in the same direction as the voltage is going up and down. So hopefully, you hear a guitar a little louder when we stand in front of a microphone. I know this isn't very exciting so far. Well, have to cover the basics of physics first. Now, the thing is, with a microphone, is it's going to pick up the sound waves of everything around it. So in a big band, the problem is it's going to pick up all the other instruments. So the next challenge was, how can we pick up just the string vibrations and figure out how to convert that to electrical energy? Well, if we use a metal guitar string, we can actually change a magnetic field based on how that string is moved. So if we place a small magnet underneath the string and wrap a coil of wire around it, the magnetic change will now actually create a voltage. So when the string moves, we're actually changing a voltage out of this pickup. So now we're no longer picking up all the acoustic energy around. We're actually picking up just the string vibration. And since the sound waves aren't needed anymore, that means the overall shape of the body and its resonance is no longer needed. And with that, the electric guitar was born. The first came out in the 30s by someone named Rickenbacker, and it was nicknamed the frying pan for fairly obvious reasons. And guitar really became an obsession quite quickly. By the 50s, Leo Fender had introduced the Stratocaster, which is still one of the most popular guitars today. Now, all of these guitars had the advantage now of being able to be connected directly into an amplifier, and that to a speaker, and now we could play a guitar louder than it's ever been played before. But something had changed. We don't quite sound like an acoustic guitar anymore. There's some obvious differences with the instrument, but maybe most importantly was this amplifier. As we said, the amplifier's job was just supposed to make things louder, but it did something else instead. Now, guitar amps at the time were really based on the same technology as old radios. They used vacuum tubes to make things louder. The difference was people listened to their radios at a fairly normal level. But guitar players quickly decided that amps should be turned all the way up. And something interesting happened. The waveform, our tone, our timbre changed. When we put in a sound, in this case our trusty sine wave will show again, when the tubes were pushed to their limits, the waveform changed and so did the tone. And with that little change, something called rock and roll was born. So, had that not happened, and we could just plug a guitar right into an amplifier whose job was just to make things louder, well, then playing some simple fourths would sound something like this. But we add a little bit of this tube magic and turn things up a bit, and it turns into this. Don't even have to play. Thank you. I'll give the true confession now. I'm a keyboard player, so you won't be hearing much virtuosity on the guitar, but I will give you a few more examples in a moment. So now, we had this whole new genre that came about thanks to this distortion. But it didn't stop there. That really started, as Robert taught you a little bit ago, this thing called gas. Because guitarists discovered that each different amplifier changed the sound in its own unique way, which led to the desire to collect a huge range of amplifiers. And of course, the guitars themselves evolved with different pickups, different electronics, different body shapes, which was one of many reasons why people decided they wanted to collect a number of guitars. And on top of that, some other devices called stomp boxes got invented. These electronic devices could change our voltage even further and be sitting between our guitar and our amps, which led to the desire to collect a huge range of stomp boxes. So, the situation became quite simple. If you wanted to have a huge range of guitar tone, all you needed to do was collect a huge range of guitars and add a whole bunch of stomp boxes that you could hook up in any order you want, and hook those up to any number of different guitar amplifiers, and you could create virtually any guitar tone you want. Now, the problem we're trying to solve here is not gas. There's lots of reasons for people wanting to own all of this kind of equipment. But it does lead to some practical challenges, as well as a few economic ones. And what would you do if in the middle of a song you'd really like to have the sound change from an electric guitar to an acoustic guitar, or something like that? So the next step in the evolution of guitar technology needed to take place. how could we figure out a way to have a single system which could now take our guitar signal and process it in the same way that all these different electronic circuits did? Well, to do that, we first need to make our signal digital. So let's explain that now. The world of digital. If we look at our trusty sine wave again, and imagine it going from -1 volt to +1 volt. It's just a continuing voltage. If we want to convert that to digital, we just need to quickly take a picture, a snapshot, a measurement of the voltage repeatedly over time and store a list of numbers that represent what that voltage is. This example just has a range of 200. Most audio devices actually have over 16 million numbers to represent the full range of an audio signal's voltage. So now we have a list of numbers. We can store them in our phone. We can play audio anywhere we want. We just need to convert it back to analog, which is just this process in reverse. We take these points and at the right point in time, convert it back to its voltage, and then connect all these dots together in a continuous shape to turn it back into an analog waveform. So you might be asking, why do we care? Why do we want to turn this into numbers? Well, there's something nice about numbers. If you have a list of numbers, if you want to change it into a different set of numbers, what do? It's called math. So, and in this particular case, it's a special kind of math called DSP, digital signal processing. And all we have to do is decide what math we want. We could change numbers to something else. So let's give a simple example. If we wanted to make this analog voltage louder, we would need an analog circuit called an amplifier. And it would have some sort of gain associated with it, in this case 2. And that means when 1 volt goes in, 2 volts goes out. So for the youngest in the audience, this math problem I think you'd be able to handle just fine. What if we want to do the same thing with these numbers? Well, now we just need to multiply by 2. If we have a list of numbers, we're going to now make them twice as large. And now we have the digital representation of the same thing as this analog circuit, right? The difference is, if we want to do something different, all we need to do is change the math instead of changing all the circuitry. Now, in practice, DSP is a little more complicated, typically, than just multiplying by 2. This formula is one of our first distortion model algorithms from about 15 years ago. And we've actually spent the last 15 years analyzing hundreds of guitar amplifiers, speakers, and signal processors in order to create the mathematical formulas that represent how those circuits modify our signal. And the result of that means that we can now take any guitar and take its voltage and convert it to digital first through an analog to digital converter, and then call up any number of algorithms that represent circuits in our DSP, convert back to analog, and then connect to an amplifier and speaker, and now we can have a whole collection of guitar sounds without having to have a whole garage full of equipment. But to finish our journey, we need one more ingredient, which is the guitar itself. If we really want to control the sound of an instrument from the fingertips to the ears, we need to deal with the instrument itself. So why not apply the same process, which is called digital modeling, to the guitar? And to do that, what we've done is we've put a special pickup right in the bridge of the guitar that can pick up the energy from each individual string and all of its harmonics right in the guitar and convert each one to digital. Now we can process with mathematical algorithms different type of instruments, their pickups, their body resonance, and even their tuning right within the guitar. We can then connect that digitally to our signal processor that does our amp and effects modeling. That can be connected to our amplifier and speakers, and now we have a complete collection of instruments, amps, and effects in one system. And in practice, that looks something like this: a digital modeling guitar, here hooked up to our effects processor, and in today's example, to convert it finally to acoustic energy, because we don't get to hear numbers, is the theater's speaker system. So, as I mentioned, and I apologize in advance, I'm not a guitar player, but I will attempt to give you a few examples of the range of sounds that we can do with this. So first off, let's take this electric 6-string guitar and turn it into an acoustic 12-string. Oh, you're too kind. Now we'll go back to an electric that's tuned down a half step and has some delays and type of sound that some of you might be familiar with. nice things about effects is that when you don't really play guitar all that well, you can turn a whole lot of them on and you don't have to play very much and have something interesting happen, like this. Or make it sound very non-guitar-like. This one's down an octave and has kind of a vocal filter on it. Here's one with a bunch more delays and stepped filters. I'll give you one more that's a nice dreamlike sound that hardly requires me to play any notes at all. So there you have it, a little journey through the electric guitar and how the energy of a single guitar string can go quite far with the magic of digital modeling. Thank you very much.